happened before today. Today's a brand new day. It's a brand new season.
You're listening to Arkansas Preps Weekly on Natural State Sports, your top source for the biggest news in high school sports across Arkansas.
Here we go.
What is up, everybody? Welcome into episode 30 of Arkansas Preps Weekly here on the Natural State Sports Network. My name's Kyle Sutherland, alongside Mr. Kevin Bohannon, as we get prepped for week 3 and, of course, also recap a little bit of week 2. Kevin, I actually got ahead of myself last week. I mentioned at the top of the show that most conference play starts this week for everybody, but, of course, I forgot about the whole week 0 thing, and so there's a lot of buys. That's next week that we really dive into conference play. It's actually a pretty light week. Week 3 is known for
40 games.
I thought it was like between 40 and 50, something like that. 40's, golly, man, that's crazy. So not really a whole lot going on as far as Arkansas prep football this week, but still plenty on the slate. Big one that we'll talk about here actually shortly is, Fayetteville and Texas High, a big-time Texas program playing, and there's a couple of other out-of-state matchups that are remaining as well. But before we get started here, we got a good bit of interaction last week. I know that the listens actually, this is the first time that we've done, the first time this season. I guess this is maybe about the 4th episode of Arkansas Preps Weekly. So it's still a fairly new episode and everything, but or a new show as far as the football. But if you haven't already subscribed to the YouTube channel, go ahead and subscribe and hit that notification bell. And also make sure that you are subscribed on the audio platforms as well, Apple, Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you listen, we are there. But without further ado, we will go ahead and dive right into it. We'll get into the 7A scores as we always do start there. And Kevin, it started off on Thursday, with a Rogers trouncing of Sheridan, 40-0 at the half. The final score was 43-7. So that got us started for the week. And I'll go ahead and just say this. We really didn't learn a whole lot from this. Now, I didn't think that it was going to be quite the way it was. Now, I know Sheridan had a good bit of starting offensive linemen out. I mean, pretty much Rogers was living in their backfield. Jeff Reagan and the offense, for the most part, did whatever they wanted to do. But to me, this was really just another sign that Sheridan they're going to get there as far as they're going to be a competitive team. But they're also 3 games into the Kevin Kelly tenure. So I think most people with a functioning brain understand that it's going to take some time. However, there are those that are still living in the microwave society.
Yeah, and we are an instant gratification society, like you just said. So especially after what they did to Whitehall. And look, Whitehall is not the team they were in the past. Daryl Patton is going to get them there. He knows that. They have some work to do this past week. That they played well in a loss to Morrilton. If it wouldn't have been for some turnovers, that 34-12 game may have been closer. So, it was close against Hot Springs Lakeside. The wheels fell off, and then looking at the past 6 quarters, it is what it is. And Coach Kelly, look, he's going to adapt, and those kids are going to learn to fight through it. He's not going to change the way he does things because it's been successful for over 20 years. You just have to get to it. Rogers is really good. I mean, it looks like they're my favorite to be the number 3 and maybe even number 2 if they can get a win against a Bentonville team. So we'll just have to see how that goes. But, Rogers, they're deep. They're really deep. So, while them winning didn't surprise me, the margin of victory and how they did it. But after learning, like you said, Sheridan lost some linemen, had some guys out. It's just going to be tough for a little while.
And then some other scores: Lufkin, Texas, 57-12 over Little Rock Southwest. Ruston, Louisiana against Cabot. That's been, I believe, the 3rd time that they've played as many years. Ruston gets the best of Cabot, 49-10. And then Bentonville West, they lost a shootout, 49-48 to Muskogee, Oklahoma, which, of course, that's where Cam Curl went, that played for the Razorbacks, then got drafted by the Commanders, that at the time the football team, now plays for the Los Angeles Rams. They might have lost Did West, but junior Trey Thompson, 36 of 51, 426 yards, which is I don't know if that's a school record, but I know the 6 touchdowns that he passed for are a school record. Also, Q Thompson, 18 receptions. That is a school record, 197 yards and a touchdown. Harris Vinson, 11 receptions, 131 yards, 3 touchdowns. So a lot of offense in that one. some West guys put up big numbers. Springdale, how about those Bulldogs, Kevin? The Red Dogs are 3-0 for the first time since 2018 after a 37-7 win over Bishop Kelly. Conway, they just continue to row. They smacked Marion around 42-7. It was at the half. The final score was 49-7. I believe it was six or seven turnovers.
Six that I know
Six
of, yeah.
of them that were forced. I remember Chuck saying that when Chuck Livingston, when he called in to the postgame show. And that was another big game, of course, for the Arkansas commit Grayson Wilson, 11 of 19, 256 yards, and then 2 touchdowns, and then had another one on the ground. Pulaski Academy. Okay, so they beat West Monroe, Louisiana, a very storied program in Louisiana. They did PA 31-27. This is another one of those just crazy PA games that like your arm is falling off if you're keeping stats. But they pulled away about midway through the third quarter. West Monroe made a little bit of a comeback, and then the Bruins pulled away to take it 67-47. I mean, Kevin, if we have not seen so many of these types of games from PA in the last 2 decades, Brandon Cobb with a career night, 346 passing yards, 6 touchdowns, another 100 yards and 2 touchdowns on the ground. Javian Walker also had 114 yards on the ground, including a 60-yard touchdown. Big night for the defense, too. Caden Nash led with 11 tackles. But I know this was a really big game, of course, with head coach Anthony Lucas being from around that area, being like Tallulah, Louisiana is where he's from. So, no, this was definitely big, not only to beat that team, but to play a team from Louisiana. But again, I mean, I don't know how many times we've seen. I've covered many of them personally. I've seen some of them throughout the years. I've played in shootouts against Pulaski Academy. This is just something that they've done so many different times.
Yeah, and ask Springdale Harbor how it is to go over there and score 40, 50, 60 points and come out on the losing side of things. It's not fun. And I'm sitting there at the studio and getting ready for the scoreboard show, and I turned on the PA game because they were a little bit further behind than everybody else. And I saw that, look, this is probably going to be the game that is the last to go off outside of Texarkana El Dorado, evidently. So I'm watching it, and West Monroe's up 34-31. They scored the first out of halftime. PA scores, onside kick, recover. PA scores, onside kick, recover. PA scores, onside kick, recover. And he scored 4 straight touchdowns. Next thing you know, they're up by 20, 21. I mean, and it just just rolling. Brandon Cobb has 15 touchdowns the last 2 weeks. 15. I mean, it's just ridiculous.
But for a PA quarterback, like that is ridiculous, but it's like another season almost.
Yeah, but, and I'm talking to Barry Grooms about this Friday night, and I'm like, he's a difference maker with his legs. And I knew he was athletic. Don't get me wrong, but, he's slicing defenses up. You get 5 wide out there, and they got 4 – defense puts 4 linemen up there. I mean, that's 5-on-4 with Cobb back there. And, I mean, he's got a lead blocker running out there. He's going to get 15, 20 yards, and that's what they do. Plus, he can scramble out of the pocket. PA, what they've always done good at is extending plays, the way they roll their lines. It is frustrating for defensive ends, defensive linemen, linebackers, because with the way they roll their pockets, their quarterbacks do a great job of throwing their receivers open, and it's just frustrating as a defense. So it's looking like PA in the 7A and the 7A Central is going to give teams a lot of trouble.
And then speaking of the 7A Central, Bryant, they got redemption over Parkview. So they did the Hornets Parkview's 27-game win streak a year removed from Parkview ending their 54-game win streak against in-state competition. And Kevin, really the story of this one. Jordan Walker had a great game, much better than his stats showed. 9 of 18 passing, 143 yards. And that's the main stat, the 9 of 18. But he also passed for 3 touchdowns and then had 10 carries for 51 yards. That counter trade was just killing Parkview all night. Daniel Anderson, the Notre Dame commit, 98 yards and a touchdown. Myron Thresh, who is going to be a teammate at Washita Baptist with Jordan Walker, 10 carries, 69 yards. And then Kamari Austin and Carter Ratliff, just one of the state's better duos at wide receiver. Each had a touch. Actually, Kamari had 2 touchdowns, and then Carter had 1. But really the big story in this one was the line of scrimmage. Bryant just dominated it on both sides. Parkview was pretty one-dimensional, just was not able to get a whole lot going in the passing game. I know that's kind of been a subject. Quentin Murphy struggled against Melissa, did a little better against Maumelle. but really that Bryant defense, they just clamped down. And Quad Sanders has made it pretty apparent that, look, this wasn't like a revenge game or anything like that. They're looking at this season, but there is no doubt that after winning 5 straight and then coming up short last year, Bryant continues to believe that they have something to prove, and they are showing it really through these first 3 games. I know they're excited to have a bye week before conference play begins after that brutal non-conference slate.
Yeah, and this looked like a 7A versus 5A matchup. The last 2 years it really didn't, even though Bryant came out on top. I believe it was 20-10 2 years ago. So
22, yeah.
Yeah, in 22. So it looked, because of the depth, because of just the size. Yeah, Parkview doesn't, when they get off the bus, they don't look like a regular 5A team. But against Bryant, they did. And you and I have talked about it on here. I've talked about it just about everywhere I've been. The difference in this game was going to be the ability to stretch the field by Bryant and Jordan Walker versus the inability of Quentin Murphy to get the ball down the field. So they'll figure it out, and Parkview's going to be okay. There's nothing to panic about or anything right here. Bryant is just that much better right now. Now, does that mean Bryant beats them every time out of 10? No, but they were better this year, and it showed. So, but like Quad Sanders said, and it was funny because that's what everybody had been talking about, us included. Look, are they going to come back after they have it on their mind? Yeah, but it's his job to keep them focused on what lies ahead. If they would have lost that game, every one of their goals would have still been ahead of them. But it's Quad Sanders' job, and kudos to him, because, look, it's hard to maintain a culture that Buck James had built, and he's doing a great job of it.
Speaking of doing a better job, I'm not doing too great of a job because I forgot to do our rundown on this side. Yeah, no, Will didn't forget. It was Kyle that forgot. So he would have been really mad at me if I would have gone through this whole entire show after he had made these graphics. But that was what we were going to finish it off with. Is so Fayetteville, in what should be a premier matchup, they take on Texas High School, who's 3-0, also known as Texarkana, Texas High, whatever you want to call them. They're 3-0 right now, and they've really dominated their first 3 games. So this is a team that came into the season number 5 ranked in Class 5A Division II by Dave's Campbell's Football, which is essentially the Hootens of Texas, big-time magazine down there. So this is going to be, a definite premier matchup. You've got a 7A state champion in Arkansas and Casey Dick from Allen, Texas. Now, he didn't play in that $60 million stadium. That came a little bit after him. But, Kevin, just another opportunity. We've fared well in some of our out-of-state competitions, and we've fared not so well. But I have done a little bit. It's just Monday when we're recording. I haven't done a ton of research on this team, but from what I have gathered, they've got 2 really good running backs, both around 1,000 yards last year. They got a quarterback that passed for 2,300, about 25 touchdowns. So Fayetteville, no question, is going to have its hands full, but this is why you play these games, to get ready for another state title run.
That's exactly right. And for those that'll watch the game or be at the game, it's not the Texas High Longhorns like it is the Texarkana, Arkansas High Razorbacks. Their mascot is the Tigers, but they still have the University of Texas color scheme to an extent. They have a little bit more black mixed in. But, yeah, Potter at running back, and then Bell and Johnson. Ball is a junior, and Johnson is a sophomore or a senior this year. So, you got a lot of experience coming back from a team that went 11-2 last year, 5-1 in district play, and one of the top teams in Texas. They play in an area where you got Pleasant Grove, a lot of other schools right there across the border into Texas, across from Texarkana. So, yeah, it'll be a really good test for Fayetteville. I'm really, really ready to see how they look, coming off that kind of a lackadaisical win against Broken Arrow 2 weeks ago.
And that was kind of your little teaser for everybody. I'll have something a little bit more in detail, probably either Wednesday or Thursday. We're actually, now that we're getting closer to conference play, I've done some stories, but now we'll be having some notebooks, just looking at some various things from each classification. So be on the lookout for that Wednesday or Thursday at naturalstatesports.com. So that was a lot that we had to cover in Class 7A. Let's go down to Class 6A. We'll go through some scores. Benton, coming off the bye week after their loss in the Salt Bowl, they overcome some rust, and they absolutely smoked North Little Rock 42-13. Russellville survives Sylvan Hills. The Bears came close to breaking their losing streak that dates back to the end of 2022. The Cyclones come out on top 35-33. Lincoln Christian takes the rubber match against Shiloh Christian 38-14. El Dorado, they quietly win their second in a row. That was a late night finish against Arkansas High. I believe that one was 42-20. Saw a couple conflicting scores on that one. Greenwood, they complete the non-conference sweep of the 7A West after a big night, another big night from quarterback Kane Archer. He was 23 of 28 passing, 353 yards and 6 touchdowns in the first half.
Yeah,
that's pretty good. Not too terrible. And then the Catholic Eye Rockets, 41-7 over Nolan Catholic. They had a much better weekend than my Cowboys did in Texas. At the Star in Frisco, they smashed Nolan Catholic 41-7. And then Lake Hamilton. Let's talk about the Wolves here for a second, Kevin. 49-35 over Arkadelphia. That big game from Hayden Barton. Excuse me. Hayden was the one that last year the big questions were who was going to take over for Justin Crutchmer in that backfield that was really just going to be the featured back. Now, he's not the same type of player that Crutchmer is, but he certainly gives very similar production when he is healthy.
Produces at a high level.
No question. Before he got hurt last year, he was due for a big season, had a huge night, 152 yards and 2 touchdowns. And, Kevin, I know that this is a 6A school over a 4A school, but Lake Hamilton was coming off that season that was not like them last year. And they, of course, losing Easton Hurley early in the year hurt. They had a lot of injuries. They were very young. This is the type of win. Again, I understand that it's 2 classifications lower, but Arkadelphia is a state title contender. They've been known to beat higher classification teams. And to make this kind of, I don't know if I would call it a statement, but to get this kind of momentum, this is how you really start to get on a roll, especially as you get closer to conference play.
That's exactly right. And Tommy Gillerin wanted it known, like these guys came out and played well. When he sent me the stats after the game, it was just, I was like, that looks like Lake Hamilton right there. As you mentioned, Harrison Barton, 152 yards. He's averaging 7+ yards a carry out of that wing T look that Coach Gillerin likes to do. So, big win and putting up 49 points against a really good Arkadelphia defense with Nikisa Wimberly. That just sets them up for a lot of success moving forward.
So not a whole lot in 6A this week. Probably won't have a ton next week either. Of course, our game for 103.7 The Buzz will be at Harding Academy for the showdown against 6A Benton. But that was the main news from that. We'll head on down to 5A. Greenbrier over Van Buren 38-20. Farmington earns the first win of the Tommy Tice era, 28-8 over Prairie Grove in the Battle of Highway 62. Alma survives Hot Springs 35-32. Camden Fairview blanks Pine Bluff. Man, Kevin, I know Pine Bluff, they knew that they were going to have to find some answers on offense, but really struggling to get an offensive flow going. I think they've only scored 1 touchdown, or 2 offensive touchdowns this season in 3 games. So, it's definitely some struggles down there for Coach Mike Williams and Pine Bluff. The Church of Christ showdown, Harding Academy, 53-21 over my CAC Mustangs. Not a huge shocker there. Valley View 35-6 over West Memphis. Maumelle, after getting pounced on by the Parkview Patriots, they get a win over Bologna 32-21. And then the one we're going to really dive into a little bit, Robinson over Lakeside 24-19. So, Kevin, last week we talked about Lakeside and how we believe that they are a state title contender. And the way that they competed in this game, I think really just further validates that. They were down 17-0, the Rams were, at halftime. Then they scored 13 unanswered points in the third quarter. Then the Senators were able to, I think each of them traded a touchdown in the fourth quarter, and Robinson survived. But, this is a Robinson team that just has a history of getting beat by PA in week 0. Then they go on a roll, whether they're in 4A, 5A. Now, I know last year was kind of an exception, but really over the last couple of years other than last season. And then Lakeside had that breakout season under Coach Rock last year, and now they're just continuing to improve, even though they had to replace all those, especially those pieces on offense in particular. So this, to me, the score, and not necessarily just the loss, but the score in the fact that they were down, they were getting shut out at halftime, easily could have rolled over and died at that point, but they competed. This just further proves to me that really behind Parkview, Lakeside, and Robinson, if they're not the top 2 contenders, they're certainly in that top 5.
That's right. And you and I talked about how good the 5A South was going to be. Magnolia beats up on bauxite team that is limping into an off week right now. So, yeah, the 5A South, Hot Springs, they're just not as good as they were last year with Matty Ice and Matt Contreras at quarterback. Camden Fairview, that a shutout of Pine Bluff is no easy task, and they did it. Junie Atkins has had a really good start to the year. But, yeah, as you said, we talked a lot about this, and Hot Springs Lakeside the next 2 weeks, and last week being week 1 of that, their next 2 games shows us really what they're about. So, yeah, it's going to be tough to go to Robinson and win. And, you got to give kudos to Tyler Updegrove and that Robinson defense for shutting down Grady Oman and a high-flying Lakeside team. Put up 56 points the week before. They put up, in the high 30s against a Lake Hamilton team. That just shows you how talented that Robinson defense is. And Tyson Bratton had a really good night as well. Nick Abrams is going to be a consistent bell cow for the Senators this year. So everything that we talked about Robinson could be, it's come to fruition so far. I think Bratton is getting more comfortable in the system right now, and that's one thing Coach Escola talked about on the Robinson Sports Network, that like he's a typical extension of the coaching staff on the field. So he can be that guy and is that guy for the Senators. Really looking forward to seeing them in that Central Conference this year, and can't wait to that matchup with Maumelle down the road.
Then down in Class 4A, Ozark survives Charleston 35-34. Southside takes, I believe this is the 4th consecutive battle, at least 3rd consecutive battle of the bridge over Batesville, 31-7. Star City, how about those Bulldogs under Coach Norton? Now, Kevin, I know they beat a Dumas team that's kind of struggling, McGee team that we're not exactly sure now that McGee's played up again, all non-conference, but this is a team that needed I don't know if a pulse is the right word, because they struggled in the last season under Chris Marine, but then they had a good 2022, but definitely needed a shot in the arm. I certainly think that that's fair. And, Coach Norton mentioned on the scoreboard show the other night how there's just a lot of excitement in that town, because 2-0 is 2-0. So you don't know what it's going to look like in the 8-4A. I actually said it the other way around this time. Normally I say it the other, but you don't know what that's going to look like. But that's something that I'm really excited about just for them, because I know, and of course, they've dealt with tragedy that town has really over the past 4 months. So you love to see that. So hats off to Coach Norton for the 2-0 start down there. And then also John Fogelman at Malvern, 3-0.
3-0.
I know that you're, of course, you played for Coach Fogelman. I know you're happy to see that 48-38 over Stuttgart. So, there's very excited. I was talking to our buddy Ron the other night, Ron McNamara, and I was talking to him about just, there was a lot of questions about losing Jalen Dupree, a 6,000-plus yard rusher. And then, of course, I know that Tavion Clegg is one that's really doing really well for him. So, definitely really happy for Malvern and Coach Fogelman there, 3-0 start. Creed Vega, let's talk about him for a second. Dardanelle and their 44-37 win over Nashville. I know we did pretty much a full segment on him the other, maybe that was after week 0. 241 yards. 2 weeks ago, 241 yards passing, 2 touchdowns, 245 yards on the ground, and 3 touchdowns. Nashville, they're a down team right now, but again, it's not really about the competition or what putting up those kind of numbers when everybody's probably going to sell out to stop one person. I mean, the 250 yards passing, that's one thing, but to add 250 rushing on top of that, that's phenomenal. I still think that Creed is a very underrated player in Class 4. I mean, again, I slept on him hard last year. I've said that a million times. Just a phenomenal performance there. I know that, of course, by the time that this drops, we'll have a lot of players of the week. You'll still have your primetime performer and all those different things, but certainly near the top of the list for player of the week. And then the big one in Class 4A that, again, I don't know that nobody saw it coming. It's more so the margin of victory, but Elkins, they open up some eyes with a 42-7 win over Warren. Now, Kevin, I know that Warren's had to make a change at quarterback, which the first 2 weeks went really, really well. But I think that this is really just more of a game that, hey, Elkins, they're still really, really good. We kind of felt like they might go away with all that not go away, but take a few steps back with all that they lost. But they're still right up there at the top, and they fully proved that on Friday night.
Yeah, Jaquaden Walden last week before the Warren game against Darnell had 15 carries, 222 yards, 4 touchdowns. And he had another three or four touchdowns the other night. Landon Martin at receiver had a good night as well. But it was the defense that, came out and made a statement. I think they got a little bit of bulletin board material that, look, Warren's got these wide receivers that Elkins won't be able to cover. They'll just spread them out all over the field and let Burks run all day. We expected a high-scoring game out of this because of both of the offenses had been so potent this year. Look, 2 years ago, Elkins, the last 2 years, they've scored 51 points a game, 49 points a game. So they've been known to have a really prolific offense and the way they spread it out. But replacing the guys that you had to replace in Dean and Chairs, they've done it. And they beat a Darnell team last week 51-0. Then you put up 42-7 against a Warren team that was number 1 in Class 4A, no matter what poll or what ranking system you look at. So that was huge for them. And they're going to win the 1-4A. It's going to be pretty much a cakewalk for them. It's every year it is. The question has always been, how do they play with those teams from the other parts of the state, the 7-4A, the 8-4A? They made the statement that they could do it now. Last year they came up a little bit short against Harding Academy. Harding Academy's gone. You can forget about that. So now you got an Elkins team that's really looking like they could be the cream of the crop in Class 4A.
And Class 3A, tell me if you've heard this before in multiple sports. Now, I know that there's obviously, a lot of teams and stuff, but it is just an absolutely loaded field. We'll go through some class. At least that's the way it appears right now. We'll go through some scores first. So Rivercrest 56-32 over East Poinsett County. Mayflower, almost said Maumelle. Mayflower, who is 3-0, they take down England. And, of course, my dumb butt forgot to put the score. But Mayflower, nonetheless, is 3-0. Walnut Ridge 44-30 over Earl. Boonville big over rival Paris, old-time rival Paris 35-9. Bismarck 46-7 over Glen Rose. I believe that's the first time in about a decade that Bismarck has beaten Glen Rose, and with authority did they do that. Speaking of with authority, Newport Greyhounds take down the Salem Greyhounds 42-6. Definite statement win there. Fordyce 58-10 over Mineral Springs. Kevin, Cadillac Ellison. So I got a Facebook message, I guess, I don't know, week and a half ago, and had somebody asking me to tell them about Cadillac Ellison. Well, I didn't know that was his nickname. Now, of course, we saw this kid at media. Now, we featured 64 teams at media days back in July, hundreds of players. He was the only freshman that was brought of all the 64 teams. And I talked to Coach Rogers a little bit after the media days, and he was just like, we're probably going to go through some growing pains, but he's our guy. I mean, he's just very mature for his age, and he has already proven that. First off, the kid is like, it's almost like, and I know a lot of kids today don't know who Jared Lorenzen is, but he's almost Jared Lorenzen reincarnated at like 14, 15 years old.
I called him Baby Griswold.
Yeah.
Griswold.
Darian Griswold. So I actually, funny story, I played against Darian Griswold when he was a freshman. Mark Courtney was at Dumas, and that was my senior year. Darian was 3 years younger than me. Of course, he ended up playing tight end at Arkansas State. But yeah, that's a great comparison. Ellison was big the other night in the massive win over Mineral Springs. And I say massive, like mainly meaning the deficit, of course. But first 2 passes were incomplete. Then he completed 14 of 16 for 265 and 4 touchdowns. Also had 58 yards rushing and 2 touchdowns on the ground. So, Kevin, last week, kind of what we had discussed was the 3-headed monster, really a 3-headed race, whatever you want to call it, between Boonville, Prescott, and Newport. While I do believe that's still the case, with also maybe Rivercrest, just doesn't matter what class they're in, they seem to always
they're
be
always
going to
be
forgotten.
there.
Yeah, it just always seemed to be that forgotten one for whatever reason. But I'll tell you, I like Fordyce. I'm not quite ready to put them into contenders yet, but they continually keep rising. I really like Bismarck. I think Bismarck is one of those teams, and we kind of had that feeling coming. I like Walnut Ridge too, out of Region 3, but Bismarck has really been making a statement. I think Glen Rose towards the back end of the season is going to be there. They could be one of those teams. They're very young, got a good quarterback, but like you said, they're young. They graduated a big 2024 class. I think that Glen Rose maybe towards like the week 6 through 10 is when you could probably really see them continue to climb here in a couple of weeks. But Bismarck is really the one. I would say Bismarck and Fordyce have been the two teams that really continue to make noise for me in Class 3A. But Bismarck, I mean, they're lopsided wins against pretty quality competition. I think the Mansfield game, was that a close one, like 35-31?
35-31, yeah.
Yeah. So they beat Mansfield, still a quality opponent, but really, I mean, just clicking on all cylinders are the Bismarck Lions.
Yeah, Ben Keithley, quarterback for Bismarck, was 9 of 12 for 326 yards and 5 touchdowns.
9 completions for 300 plus.
Yeah, that's over for all the math majors out there. That's about 35 yards of completion. Yeah, and so they're throwing it all over the place. Said, we expected this, and the Mayflower scores 42-0, second straight shutout for the Eagles after shutting out their rival Bigelow last week. So 35-0, 42-0, huge win. Keandre Barker, in Newport, they made a statement by beating Salem the way they did. I mean, it wasn't even close. So, how do you shut them down? You really don't. You hope they just don't get off the bus one night. And so now you got Newport, Walnut Ridge, and Rivercrest all in the same conference. How they beat each other up throughout the year, it's one of those situations where you could see a tri-champion and they all go 6-1, and then you got somebody as a 3 seed. One of those 3 teams is going to be a 3 seed. Think about that for a second. Now, you're going to get a top 5 team. It sounds like when we were at Sylvan Hills back in the day. You get a number 4 seed, and they're ranked number 7th in the nation, or 7th in the state. So that's just the way it works. So Salem in the 2 is going to be okay. Charleston's playing really well in the 1, but as you said, that middle part, Bismarck, Mayflower, and then we were down there, and I got to talk to Coach Tim Rogers for a little while in between segments the other day at our Sonic Blast in Fordyce. I said, man, it's his 14th year down there. He's been there since 1985. He is Fordyce Redbug through and through. I mean, bleeds the red and black. So
he coached Clay Toddy, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, he did. So he's been there through everything with the Red Parker days and going back and forth from 3A to 2A to 4A, 3A, 2A, down back to 3A. So I asked him, I was like, what do you like better? And he said, well, we don't have the numbers to compete all the way through in Class 3A. We can compete, but it's just is what it is. Now, think about this. They won it in 19 and 20 and went to the state championship game in 21. So the guys that come in this year, they haven't had a state championship ring, whether it be a runner-up or a championship ring. So, that those guys really know that. They want to get one before they get out of there. And I think, having somebody like Ellison, we were talking, Cam Burks moved to Warren from Fordyce. And he said, look, if Burks was here, Ellison would be in the 9th grade playing against 9th graders. That would have been unfair. That would have been absolutely unfair and may have been child abuse. I joke, I kid. Seriously, I'm joking. But it's good. Yeah, Ellison's there, and I shook his hand. His hands are huge, Kyle. Like, I have big hands, but
he's a big dude.
He wraps hands. I was like, baby Griswold. I just looked at him. He just kind of laughed because I had told Coach Rogers, I was like, he looks exactly like Darian did when he was a freshman. I mean, he's built, he's a big kid, but he can run. He's got a really good arm. So, it's going to take them a little bit because they probably got about 22 guys that can play football, and they got 33 on the roster. And then you're playing against, the Prescotts who have 45 and 50. But, at the end of the day, they're going to be one of those contending, top 6-8 teams in the state. So a lot of fun in Class 3A. We were talking about it the other night with Barry, and I was like, man, just if teams stay healthy, it's going to be one of the most fun playoffs to cover because of the potential matchups you can get.
This reminds me, just talking about Derek Griswold and just all the speed that Newport has, it really does remind me of my senior year. So in 2007, if I'm not mistaken, I think Newport, that was the last time they went undefeated in the regular season. Was that 2000? They went 10-0, and I believe they had the bye because we had a bye week. Well, they played Dumas in the second round, and everybody was like, how in the world? And I say it's very similar because everybody's like, how is they going to stop this rushing attack? I can't even remember who they had. Of course, Dumas had Kendall Council and a few of those other guys. And basically, Dumas stopped them with their speed. The only team that I believe is going to be able to match up with them speed for speed is Prescott. And Boonville's obviously really good every single year, but athlete for athlete, speed for speed, I think probably that only team in the state is likely Prescott. Now, look, we're in mid-September. I'm not trying to get too far ahead. Injuries can happen, Lord forbid, or whatever the case may be. But to me, even though this is a very loaded class, as we just elaborated to, I think that's probably the case right there. Is if anybody will, it's probably going to be the
absolutely. That was the year that Newport was in the 2-4A. So that was Bald Knob, Stuttgart, Lone Oak, Southside Batesville. That group of teams right there. And that team beat Southside 17-7 that year. They beat Pocahontas 56-9, Gosnell 57-22. And the Dumas game was a 51-48 game. I remember that because that 07 year, my dad was at North Pulaski. They opened with Dumas that year, so I followed them the entire year.
Yeah, and it was funny because, and I'll say this, and we'll go down to 2A. It was funny because Kendall Council, who ended up, it was a quick little dude, man. I mean, he ended up going to play at Ouachita Baptist. But it was funny because Kendall was not very tall. He was like 5'9",
Justin
5'10".
Jones was a running back.
Justin Jones, that was his name.
Yep.
Justin Jones was 20. I couldn't remember the running back's name, but he was a short dude, quick as a cat. But what was funny about Council, see, that was when Jamarcus Russell, that was, I think, right after Jamarcus Russell had graduated from had left LSU to go to the draft. Yeah. But he wore number 2. Jamarcus Russell's this like 6'6", 6'7" massive dude. And Council, and I'm not trying to talk down on it, but Council's, 5'9", 5'10". And where it was just funny. Because instead of LSU on the helmets, they had DHS. It looked exactly like it. I just thought
I sold him that decal, by the way. The company I was at, we designed it, and he was like, I want it to look like LSU. And I was like, well, we can do that. It just can't say LSU, but the tire was as close as it could, and there was enough difference in the decal. They did. They looked at the color scheme and everything they rolled out. So, I got to have a hand in that one.
All these things are tying into the 07 season, man. It's nostalgia in the air. And last but not least, in Class 2A, a couple of scores that we'll go through here. Cross County 50-12 over Piggott. That's the first victory of the Van Pascal era for the T-Birds. Mark Tree 42-14 over Gurdon. Junction City, they survived Smackover to win 17-15. Conway Christian 27-24 over Atkins. Des Arc 34-12 over Bald Knob. And then the premier matchup of the week in Class 2A for Week 3 is Carlisle facing Des Arc. Both of those teams are undefeated. But Kevin, I think as it's crazy to think about. We're 2 weeks or so away from mid-season. And I think probably the biggest storyline of Class 2A is now Junction City. They did get their first win. But really them being 1-2, but more so Mineral Springs. Mineral Springs is off to a tough start. Now, look, they've played tough competition. I don't want to take anything away from them on that. But they've had a really tough start. Really lopsided losses. Does that mean that I think that Mineral Springs is going to be a dud in 2A? No, I'm not saying that at all. But I think that's probably – I think we're definitely a little bit shocked that Junction City had the start that it had. Not necessarily that it lost to Carlisle. Carlisle's certainly a favorite too, as we've mentioned so many times. But I think that's probably the biggest shocker to me in this class is just the start of Mineral Springs. Again, I'm not saying that means their season is over, but that's the biggest surprise to me through 2 games that's where they're at.
Yeah, and, for 2A football, it's, a lot of it's been focused on I-40 and below. Of course, you got Junction City. Big win for their, especially the way they shut down Mitchell Polk 17-15 for the Dragons. Held onto the ball, just kind of played keep away, and then you just shut down an offense that had put up 64 the week before in a 64-36 win for the Buckaroos. So big win for Junction City. He kept them from going 0-3 in conference play. So that was huge. Mark Tree, they've got a 2-headed monster. Ken Carter, of course, at quarterback, had a good night. But TJ Hodges Jr., 14 carries, 278 yards, 4 touchdowns on the night. He's one of those that'll definitely be on the primetime performers list and a good candidate for primetime performer of the week. So, Carlisle, Des Arc, throw out the records. I think it's going to be a really good one. Carlisle, really want to see them – make sure they didn't have a hangover coming off Junction City. That's the biggest thing. McCrory looked really good in their win over Clarendon the other night. So Conway Christian continued to roll. Jaron Thomas, good night for them. So it seems to be the same 4 or 5, but I really think, the top 2 or 3 really kind of really separated themselves from the pack right now.
Yeah, this Carlisle Desart matchup, you always loved it. Normally it's the past couple of years that Hazen's been in that mix as well. Because, of course, you got the Carlisle Hazen matchup at the end of the year. And that last year, Desart beat Hazen, which, of course, before the year, we really thought that Hazen was going to be the hands down favorite. I know that they lost Luke King, which turned out to be a much bigger in the 2023 class, which turned out to be a much bigger loss than we maybe expected. But I do think that Desart, because we talked about last week, Cash Flanagan, who passed away last week, I guess it was, he graduated in the 2024 class, was an exceptional player for the Eagles. They're obviously playing for him since so many on that team, so many in that town were so close to him. So that's something that they have on top of the talent. When you play for, what was that quote that Bray Cook said around when Garrett Ekman's passing? When you have something to play for, I'm paraphrasing, you're a pretty good team, but when you have someone to play for, you're unstoppable. And so that's something that I know Desart, on top of the talented team that they have, that's something that they're utilizing. But also too, Carlisle, to me, I said it last week, after the Junction City game. I really do feel like that right now they're the favorite. Now, Conway Christian, I think, is really, really good, but that's the biggest kicker because Junction City's in the top. Now, the conference, the 2A3, it might not be. Now, again, it's kind of a little bit of a mirage right now because I don't think that, Mineral Springs they haven't looked good in their first 2 games, but I don't think like it's going to be like that throughout their entire conference because they have played up. Murfreesboro, I've been a little bit surprised with how they performed this year. I know, again, they lost some, but had a pretty decent bit coming back. How they perform in conference play will be interesting. But, yeah, to me right now, I think Carlisle is just the most complete team. They've got and with a freshman quarterback. I think that people are they need to start paying attention to Ty Tanksley. They will in baseball for sure. Now, I know obviously a good bit about it in baseball, but that's on top of all that Carlisle has.
I was super impressed. And I'd seen him, and I talked to Coach Wilson, how he did in 7-on-7. He was coming off his 14 U trip season, so they didn't play too much into the summer. So there was not too much overlap in what they did in the summer. But it's just one of those Carlisle teams, like we talked about, after the Junction City win. Look, this is a team that goes in and does it in the weight room. Petrus is a 600-pound guy, at $145, soaking wet. So then you got Golahair. The tradition continues, and they played Junction City and beat them at Carlisle's game. Carlisle made it their type of game, so that was the key. Now continue going on. Can't have any injuries. But, yeah, with you when you got the athletes outside and you got an arm back there and you can spread it out in 2A and not get anybody hurt, you got a chance to win it all.
Well, I did want to bring up, since we're actually finishing up a little bit quicker here. So last week you sent me some games to pick. You sent me 25 games to pick. And I have to say, since I had a good week, I got to make sure I went 18-6, which is a little bit better than I thought. I was going through, so I missed on the Magnet Cove. I picked Poen over Magnet Cove. I picked Arkadelphia over Lake Hamilton. Yeah, I picked Warren over Elkins. Sorry, Elks, on that one. You heard me wrong. I did pick Parkview over Bryant. In my heart, I truly did believe Bryant was actually going to win this game. I genuinely did, but I think part of it was just I went with the hot hand. Parkview was on the streak, which, by the way, Greenwood now has the longest streak in this. Now that Parkview's 27 games streak. Yeah, so they're at 16. Then Boonville and Fayetteville are at 15. But Greenwood football actually reminded me of this. Their Twitter page, they have won 65 consecutive at Smith Robinson Stadium. So last year, PA had like an 80-something game win streak at Rector Field, Joby Hatcher Stadium, that Greenwood, of course, snapped. And now I guess Greenwood has the longest home streak and regular or just streak in general winning.
Yeah, that's a 10+ year streak right there.
That's very, very impressive. I did pick Hot Springs over Alma, and I picked Lakeside over Robinson.
Yeah.
So
that was we between the mats, those guys get me in their pick'ems, and I looking at everything. So those games were pretty much coin tosses at the end of the day. And, you look at it and, that's what you have. those guys that can pick 91, 92%, kudos to you. Kyle and I get to be on the inside of all this stuff, and sometimes I think we overthink stuff. But again, it's high school football. And picking high school football games is not the same as it was 10, 15 years ago, I swear. Because the game has changed so much. You never know what can happen on a given night. So I think we need to start having injury reports come out every week.
That's what I was going to say. It's a lot different than high school and college because, or than college and NFL, because now even in college you got the injury. Or I guess have the injury reports started
this week?
This week, okay. I knew
Wednesday night.
Yeah. Okay, so it's coming this week, and and then you got cases like what George. Speaking of, I keep going back to I promise I'm not a hometown hero, just continuously talking about my playing high school career. But George Shelton, God rest his soul, like with what he did in the playoffs that same 07 season. We played his signature wishbone. I don't know how many times, and then those jokers came out and ran the spread. And you try playing all those dollar way athletes when you haven't prepped 1 single second for it.
Yeah, you got to chase them around.
Man, yeah, Jess Grandy. Oh gosh, they had some players on that team. So, well, we're going to wrap it up a little early this week, and probably next week too, because there won't be a ton. We'll be probably more so of a preview of Week 5 next week, or Week 4 next week. Since we're not having as many games this week and everything, so that's likely what we'll do for that. But thank you everybody for tuning in. As always, be sure to check us out at naturalstatesports.com for our written content, and then also if you haven't already, subscribe on YouTube, hit that notification button, and you can also subscribe on audio platforms, Spotify, Apple, iHeartRadio. We are there. So for the rest of us here at Natural State Sports, Mr. Kevin Bohannon, my name is Kyle Sutherland. We will see you next week.